Coming up on this week's episode of TechSNAP, we finally have the answer on how the target network was physically breached, and it just might make you facepalm. Plus, Adobe has an urgent update, the NSA's Orchestra program, and then a big batch of your questions and our answers. All that and a heck of a lot more on this week's episode of TechSNAP. Hi everyone, and welcome to TechSNAP. This is episode 148 of Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly Systems Network and Administration podcast. We stream this episode live on February 6, 2014. This episode is brought to you by our three fine sponsors, GoDaddy, Ting, and IX Systems. I'll tell you more about those great sponsors as this show goes on. And of course, our live stream is powered by the incredible Scale Engine over at scaleengine.com. My name is Chris, and joining us every single week is our host, the admin, the tech, and the teacher, Mr. Alan Jude.
Hey, Chris, everybody.
Hey, buddy. So you didn't get to hear it because I think you stepped away or we were having like some Skype disconnect at the time. As I record this, because we're doing a double TechSNAP today, which is always hardcore. We're starting We're starting 2 hours early. It is 33 degrees Fahrenheit in my studio, and that is because I came out here hours ago and turned on the heaters. It was 32 degrees when I came out here this morning, which is freezing. It is freezing degree. It's freezing out here, Alan. It's freezing. That's how hardcore I am. That's how hard I want to snap.
It's negative 10, so that's 15 Fahrenheit. Here,
I know.
currently,
I know. See, every time
with a wind chill of -1.
Every time I say that, people always say that. But are you sitting in that? See, I'm sitting in that.
No, it's 24.6 degrees in here.
It's my little toes are really cold, Alan. Hey, so speaking of Thursday, the 6th, I had to show this. You put it up on Twitter, so I'm not letting anything sneak out. But here it is. It's Throwback Thursday as we record this, and here it is, Mr. Alan Jude from May 2006. Alan, you look respectable there. Yeah, you look respectable. No beard. That's also, that Alan looks really nice.
This Alan doesn't look really nice?
No, I'm not saying that. Okay. Now, only fair play. Here is me from December 2001 when I lived in an apartment. I'm wearing braces. Something's wrong with my hair. It doesn't look quite as amazing as it should. But I'm still wearing pajamas, which is about right. I have a button-up shirt up top and pajamas downstairs. This is actually exactly what I'm doing today. To this day, I'm still rolling like that. So, no, party up top, or business up top, party downstairs, Alan. That's how I roll. This is why you got to follow us on Twitter. If you're not following Alan or I, he's at Alan Jude, which makes a lot of sense. And I'm at Chris LAS, Linux Action Show, on Twitter. And sometimes that's the kind of shenanigans you see. When you actually, it was my wife at Andrews that posted that one. Well, Alan, we have quite a bit of news to get to this week. It's our 148th episode, and you're starting us out this week with a pretty deep dive on this PDF that we're going to have linked in the show notes so people can see it in full detail. But tell me a little bit about security protocols and evidence.
Yeah. So a pair of researchers at Cambridge are proposing a new way of thinking about designing security protocols and building into them facilities required to generate proper evidence to be used in court for dispute resolution. So specifically, in the example they use is the EMV, or chip and pin system, used in most of the world except the US for credit card transactions. And that the fact that the way that's set up now doesn't always provide enough evidence to prove whether it was the customer that used the card or if it was a fake card. Oftentimes during a court battle with the bank over whether, they owe you a refund for these fraudulent charges or whatever, there's certain information where they won't give you because if they gave it to you and it became part of the court record or whatever, it would expose data in their banking system, right? Because it would involve giving out secret keys and things like that.
Yeah, I see that.
And so there's well, then why didn't they design it so that that wouldn't be a problem?
That was my question.
Right. So the goal of the research is to highlight the types of design considerations that should be put into things like cryptocurrencies, like Bitcoin, payment systems like electronic banking, or especially mobile payment apps and mobile banking apps that are coming out. A lot of times these are full of proprietary stuff that nobody knows about, and it's they don't seem like they're going to do what's required to make this so that you could actually dispute it and it could be proved one way or another. So they outline 5 principles to design into a security system to make it useful. The first is retention and disclosure. The protocols designed for evidence should allow all protocol data and the keys needed to authenticate them to be publicly disclosed, together with full documentation and a chain of custody. Right. So, like when we talked about the ones with the chip and pin stuff a couple months ago from the UK, where there was, you know, a guy could prove that it wasn't him using the card because he was in the UK and the card was used in like Malta or something.
Yeah.
But, you know, the bank produced record that they say proved that it was him because his PIN was used or whatever. And, you know, the records they showed, you know, it showed that the random number generator was the problem. It was predictable because it was just a counter. And so instead, they need to design a system so that they can, you know, provide the keys and the protocol and everything be open and fully documented so that, you know, it actually creates useful evidence instead of just random stuff.
Yeah.
Principle 2 is test and debug the evidentiary functionality, right? When a protocol is designed for use in evidence, the designer should also specify ways to test and debug the procedures to be followed by police officers, defense lawyers, expert witnesses, etc. An example of this one was they designed this system for truckers in Europe that recorded the amount of time they spent driving and stuff because there's limits on how much they're supposed to do so that they don't get sleepy or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's got all this cryptography stuff in it. But currently, every time it's ever been used, the police have just come or the investigators have just come and then pulled out the log files and put them in the evidence bag and just take them away. Right? The cryptography part has never been used in court. And because they, you know, the police don't know how to use it or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And so it wasn't thought out ahead of time that, you know, they would need to have training on how it would work, and it needs to be fairly uncomplicated, right?
Yeah.
They also need an open description of the TCB, or Trusted Computing Base. Systems designed to produce evidence must have an open specification, including a concept of its operation, the threat model, the security policy, and a reference implementation, and you know, protection against evaluation of other implementations.
What do you mean by that? Like in terms of assessing the vulnerabilities of potentially alternative ways to implement the security, or?
Well, yeah, without a reference implementation, everybody can read the spec and implement it a little differently, right?
I wonder how. So let's think about that for a second. Like, how would you have a reference? So something, I think of a good reference spec would have to be something that's sort of living, something that's constantly updated, right?
Well, they have a good example in the doc when they talk about it. One of them they talk about was curfew tags or like house arrest ankle bracelets.
Yeah.
Which used in many countries. They found that one in the UK, the operator kept logs only on their back-end system, which was notoriously buggy.
Sure.
And thus, it was unable to distinguish between tamper events when someone tried to remove the device and a false alarm because of bugs in the software. As a result, tampering prosecutions that were subject to technical challenges had to be dropped. So every time someone says, well, prove that it was me tampering with the device, they wouldn't be able to, and they'd have to drop the case.
Yeah. How could
because they didn't have evidence.
Yeah.
Because their back end was buggy. And, you know, since then, a different firm has taken over and whatever. But
okay.
A useful precedent may be the Google near field contact or whatever wallet system, where the logs are generated on the secure element on the NFC chip and then encrypted and stored on Google servers, thus removing both the Android handset and the merchant terminal from the trusted computing base, since a person can modify their Android and a merchant or person trying to steal a credit card can modify the merchant terminal.
Well, you could see how that could be used as a case against rooting Android phones and replacing ROMs, right? Because if these things become point-of-sale devices and your credit cards and your wallets are stored on there or whatever it is, you could see how carriers and OEMs and Google would have a much bigger incentive to prevent people from having root access to their phone.
That's why the Google system doesn't rely on the handset at all, or on the terminal.
Right, using Google's system, right, and which is a great way to do it.
But that's why it's important that there be an open description of what things are which parts are trusted and which parts aren't.
Yeah,
right?
Because then
because
you could know.
Can't understand it if you don't know which parts are trusted and which parts aren't.
Users could opt to customize their Android phone, but they would then no longer be in the trusted category. So then the merchants would know.
But the phone is explicitly excluded from the trusted part, so that won't be a problem.
Oh, just by default, it's excluded.
Yes, but in the Google one, that phone is not considered secure.
Good.
Only the NFC chip is.
Good.
Right,
Okay,
and that's the point.
Yeah.
Is that it needs to be open and documented what is part of the trusted computing base and what isn't.
Yeah.
And you have to consider things like that when you're designing a system.
Right.
And they go on to give an example of with EMV how if you could put a piece of hardware between the card and the reader, you could tell the card that the reader said that this was a signature transaction, so don't need to worry with the PIN. But you can have the piece of hardware in the middle, so the hardware in the middle tells the card you signed for it, but tells the terminal that the card said that was the right PIN, even though you entered 0000. Right? So if you get this little thing on your card and you can walk up to the grocery store terminal, right, and they turn the machine at you and you stick your card in, right?
Yeah.
You don't hand them your card anymore.
Right.
Right? So you can have this little bit of hardware stuck on your card and no one's going to notice. And that's one of the vulnerabilities in the EMV system.
Yeah. Because
it's trusting the card. And with the card being in my possession, maybe it shouldn't be trusted. And then one of the other ones, step 4 or principle 4 is failure evidentness. Right? Transaction systems designed to produce evidence must be failure evident. Right? So when it breaks down, there needs to be like a log of that. Right? Because if the security system just goes offline but doesn't record that it did,
what good is that, really?
Then
what happened while it was down?
Nothing's wrong when it was working. Thus, they must not be designed so that any defeat of the system entails a defeat of the evidence mechanism.
Yeah, no kidding.
Right? If you can just turn the logging off, then you can do whatever you want. There's no proof that you did it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it's so funny, too, is I was loosely involved with a company who was compromised, and the thing that the attackers made sure to do was verify that all of the logging had been disabled at the time of the attack. Now, it was just a web server compromise, and there was a little island hop to the SQL server, and this is all Microsoft, and somehow I forget how they disabled. No, actually, one of them was a Linux box, and it's no syslog and no event logs. And so when we were doing the investigation, that's when we were brought in. After the thing had happened, we were one of the teams brought in among several other companies. And what we were looking at was the first thing we wanted to go for. I mean, like everybody, like the first thing everybody says, every person that was brought in, the first thing they said, well, let's look at the logs. Oh, well, there's no logs. Oh,
yep.
Like, okay. So we kind of have a vague idea because there's a gap in the logs that it happened at this time, but we don't exactly know the length. And we know that the logging was started later on, back up by the system administrator, so it was just down for that entire time. And I've also seen people do tricks where they'll generate fake logs during that time. Or they'll spam the log system.
Exactly. If you generate fake logs, then nobody notices that there was logs missing.
Yeah. Or if you just pump it full of so much stuff, it's such a task to dig through it all.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, that's what grep is for.
No kidding, right? Yeah.
But, that's why in FreeBSD, there's a couple of systems to deal with things like that. Mm-hmm. You have the system append-only flag. So you can make a file so you can only ever add to it. You can never remove from it. Right? And once you crank up, so you would log forever, and nobody would be able to tamper with the log after the fact.
Right. Beautiful.
But that still assumes that there's no rootkit on the system or something.
Yeah.
So it also has audit dist, which allows you to distribute the audit logs to other computers cryptographically securely.
Oh.
So you send it over TLS, and they're encrypted, and so you can prove that the log has not been modified.
So it's sort of, as it's logging, it's like syslog with cryptographic signatures for every entry?
And also storing it to an external machine or multiple external machines.
Yeah.
So if you have like 10 machines, you have them share the logs to each other. And so each machine knows what happens on every other machine and that it hasn't been modified.
That's interesting. I know, I haven't really looked into it. I know Systemd on Linux has some really new stuff with journald to kind of help prevent with tampering. And and like in Windows, it's surprisingly difficult to do good remote event logging. But I know there's solutions there too. I'm just not quite as familiar with them.
So principle 5 is governance of forensic procedures. The forensic procedures for investigating disputed payments must be repeatable and be reviewed regularly by independent experts appointed by a regulator. They must have access to all security breach notifications and vulnerability disclosures.
What do you think? I mean, if you work through the actual implications of that, let's say Scale Engine has, gets big, 10 years, it's huge, all these customers.
This is specifically for payment. stuff.
Right, and you're taking payments, right? I mean, I'm just saying, like, would you want
Okay.
have to?
Well,
would you
we're
want
not
to hand
making
this
our
over
own
to the
payment system?
Do you see where I'm going,
The payment system. Yes, but
Yeah.
So what this
seems a
is
little
saying is that
heavy-handed.
the security system, which obviously Scale Engine didn't write, so they wouldn't be involved. But it's not the merchant that would be involved here. This is if the bank is going to charge that you committed fraud and that this wasn't fraud against you, they have to be able to prove that. And
true.
the evidence they use to prove that has to be independently verified.
Yeah.
Right. So this is more about regulating the way the whole entire payment industry works. Right. So then the procedures used to prove that this payment was made by this person or whatever need to be audited by independent experts.
That does. I mean, yeah, it seems like
And those experts need to be told about every breach of the credit card system and every vulnerability known about, like, say, EMV. Because right now, a lot of times the banks try to keep those quiet and secret. Right? So if the bank is saying that you used your credit card and you're saying, no, you didn't, and you are brave enough to take it to court against the bank, and the bank comes out with this evidence, and you don't know, but there's been proof that there's a vulnerability that allows somebody to tamper with that evidence, but you don't know about it, then you can't use that to show that's how that log is not correct. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. I follow you. Yeah, I
Anyway,
do see I see the
then-
necessity for it.
Yeah. Then there's the rest of the paper goes on to describe the way things they could do to improve the security of the EMV system by applying these 5 principles.
Oh, okay.
And it gets into a little more practical stuff.
That's useful.
Yeah. So it's a good research paper from Cambridge University.
Yeah, and especially if you're in the industry where you're thinking about this kind of stuff a lot, Alan has it linked in the show notes right there. It's the top story, and go take a look
Well,
at that.
especially if you, I think the biggest area for this right now is mobile apps, especially when a mobile app takes payment. Because right now that's kind of the Wild West.
Yeah, and there's a lot of solutions there right now that,
Yeah, and a lot of them are really bad,
yeah.
especially the homegrown ones, right? A lot of places will, I'll just grow my own. And, you know, when security is just, this won't be broken by anyone who's up to as smart as me, that's not always that great.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love the idea of the reference. All right, Alan, any other thoughts on that story?
No, that's it for that story.
All right, well, then I want to take a second and welcome back IX Systems as a sponsor of the TechSNAP program. You can get started by checking them out by going to ixsystems.com/TechSNAP. IX Systems designs systems that are really built to work with open source, and they have some of the best free BSD implementations out there you're going to find. And I can tell you that because both Alan and I have worked with them. Now, IX Systems also works great with systems powered by Intel processors. And Alan and I are both big fans of Intel chips in the server side. And
Yeah, all of my servers, every single one. I don't have an AMD system.
I know I'm the same exact way, and I have been for years now. And so a lot of my personal views and philosophies on how servers should be built, how they should be tested, how they should be supported, and how and what operating systems should go in there, IX System matches up with those expectations. And honestly, a lot of the conclusions that I've come over the 15 years of doing IT, I've landed on certain beliefs about the way servers should be built and tested, and IX Systems is right there. They're a perfect
Well, it's
fit.
not just those beliefs. It's like we've seen from studies, from like Backblaze.
Personal
that,
experience, too.
You know, if a hard drive is going to die, it's going to die in the first 3 days.
Right.
Most likely. That's the highest probability. So their battle-tested QA system that hits the machine constantly for 3 days, and then if it survives that, the chance of it breaking after that is like 40% lower.
What I really like about IX Systems is they have an awesome team there too. Not only are their bench is packed full of BSD experts. And Alan, give me a couple examples. Give me one example.
I don't know. Alexander Motin is the guy that writes this stuff so that FreeBSD can handle 1 million IOPS using only 16 desktop SSD drives.
Now, that's an incredible person to have on staff when you are building systems like this, right? I mean, look, and
he basically designed updated most of the system that makes drives fast in FreeBSD.
Yep. And I'm looking forward to Linux Fest Northwest specifically because IX Systems is often there with some representation, and it's so cool to chat with them.
They're usually at almost every LinuxCon everywhere.
Yeah.
Plus also BSD ones as well.
Yep. And that guy Chris Moore works there. I've heard of him before too. I'm not familiar,
he
but
wrote PCBSD.
Yeah, I think I've seen him on some BSD Now podcast before.
I don't know. We've interviewed quite a few people. It's hard to keep it all straight now.
Yeah, no kidding, right? So they've got great rack servers, high-end servers, and they also have the FreeNAS Mini, which I have running right behind me.
That's the other thing is that not only is their bench of BSD developers deep, but their product line. You got everything from the FreeNAS Mini, which is like a little $800 NAS thing. It works out of the box, is great. Little i3, low power, quiet.
Yep.
Great.
Yep.
Or you can get the FreeNAS Mini Plus, which is an i5, right? All great Intel stuff. And then you can go all the way up, you can get like an E3 little short depth server like I have for my router here.
Yeah.
Or you can get up like the iBot. It's like dual E5, Intel E5s with like 128 gigs of RAM and 36 hard drives. Or you can do what the FreeBSD Foundation did and get 4 10-core processors and a terabyte of RAM and 6 half-terabyte SSDs.
4 10-core processors?
Yeah, with hyper-threading. So that's 80 cores.
I wonder if FFmpeg could take advantage of that.
Yep.
I want that so bad.
Yeah.
That'd be awesome.
So it's like the entire range from like the smallest, cheapest Intel i3 to the biggest, most expensive Intel E7.
Yep. I love it. I love it. So here's what I want you to do. Go over to ixsystems.com/TechSNAP. That lets them know you heard about them right here on the TechSNAP program. You appreciate them coming back and sponsoring the show. Plus, they've got the ultimate guide to buying a new server for open source. If you plug in your name and email address, they're not going to spam you. That gets you the white paper that they had somebody write up for them. And if you're in the business of deploying systems that run open source, IX Systems is the way to go. Not only are they a fantastic supporter of running open source on hardware. Unlike other vendors who will try to push you off if you don't go down their very specific routes, IX Systems has incredible support. They do burn-in testing. They have very low failure rates, and they have amazing hardware. So go over to ixsystems.com/TechSNAP.
They don't have a goal of what they're trying to sell you. But it's like they'll listen to what it is you need to do and help you design the system exactly to your specifications.
I definitely experienced that when I bought my FreeNAS Mini. I had a few questions, and I was new to ZFS. I had questions about memory usage. I had questions about the cache. And I started up a dialogue with them, and they got me in a very reasonable path. They were very helpful. We worked back and forth, and I even told the guys, like, well, I really want good performance, so what if we just up that a little bit more memory? Like, what's the cost there? And like, we went back and forth and that kind of stuff, and it was a really good experience. I'm still happy.
I spent an hour on the phone with my consultant just discussing the SAS controllers, which ones to use, how many to use. Did I really need dual porting?
Right.
How much redundancy do they need?
Yeah.
And all kinds of stuff. And their servers will run Windows too.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
They happen to spend a lot of effort making sure that they'll run FreeBSD flawlessly, and they'll run Linux, but they'll run Windows as well.
Yeah, actually, when I got the FreeNAS Mini just for fun's sake, I didn't leave it there. I loaded Server 2012 on there. And it worked. Everything was detected. It was great. I loaded Ubuntu 12.04 on there. Everything worked awesome. And then I was able, they included an internal USB drive, and I don't know if it's like a compact flash or what. And
I think it's just a micro USB stuck in the USB
and
port.
so after I was done playing with Windows 2012 and Ubuntu 12.04, at the boot up menu, I selected that USB key, and it included a restore image back to FreeNAS, reflashed the FreeNAS installation partition. All of my data on the ZFS array just was reconnected. I was just right back where I left off. After a few minutes, okay, done playing, and I just restored it. Boom, and I thought to myself, you know what I just went through? I just went through, if I ever had my OS drive die or if I ever screwed up my FreeNAS installation, I just tried the restore process, and it was flawless. Like, they made that experience so easy. So go check them out, you guys. We're big fans of them. We're really glad to have them back on the TechSNAP program, too.
Mm-hmm.
So our next story, this Target story, continues to evolve. And here we are at 148 episodes. And one of the things that Al and I discussed before we even went on the air with TechSNAP is how we wanted TechSNAP to take some of the big stories that happen in the industry, security and otherwise, and really continue to follow them, because the mainstream media and a lot of other outlets, they carry a hot story and then it gets old and they don't give you follow-ups. And oftentimes, as the story gets older, especially with technical stories like this one, you get more good information. That's the best time to pay attention. And I think
exactly. It's like usually there's the headline and we find out, oh, Target was breached or whatever. And then, now it's like, what, 2 or 3 months later since we had the original story?
Yeah.
We finally have the details about how it happened.
Yeah. And now we can take these and apply them to actual security, like real life security. Yep. And so Krebs on Security is running another fantastic post on now we physically know how the malware might have gotten into the network originally, right?
Right. So as we talked about a couple weeks ago, Krebs said that, while he was reporting on the fact that there was some relation to this BMC network management software, that the Wall Street Journal said that their source said it was a different vendor whose credentials had gotten disclosed and they were used to break into the target network. So now we know the details, reported by the Wall Street Journal and Reuters, that the initial intrusion into the target network was traced back to network credentials that were stolen from a third party. In this case, that vendor was the refrigeration, heating, and air conditioning subcontractor that ran the HVAC systems at the target stores and a bunch of other top retailers. Sources close to the investigation said the attackers first broke into the retailer's network on November 15th of 2013 using network credentials from Phasio Mechanical Services, which is a company in Sharpsburg, Pennsylvania, that monitors and controls the refrigeration and HVAC systems.
Isn't this so? These stores just have people remotely monitoring their temperatures all the time, apparently. I guess to improve customer experience. I guess. So, the real crime here would be, okay, if you need to give these vendors remote access to your HVAC system, freaking separate the HVAC system from the rest of the network. I mean, give me a break. From user accounts to actual physical network.
It's not immediately clear why Target would have given the HVAC company external network access, or why that access wasn't cordoned off from Target's payment network, let alone the rest of their network. We've seen stuff like this before, where the HVAC system of a company in New York, I forget what kind of company, I think it was financial or something, got breached, and then they, sat in the HVAC system and then jumped into the computer networks and infected the computers. And then they cleaned up the computers, and then they just got reinfected again to that same HVAC network. They couldn't figure out how it was getting into their network because it was coming in from this system that nobody was thinking about.
Yeah.
And I know Google's HVAC systems got breached before at their office in Australia.
That's right.
And remember, it had control of security cameras and stuff as well.
Yeah, I remember.
It's all one system. Yeah. So if you go back in the TechSNAP archive, you can find this happening plenty of times before. It's not the first time this has happened.
People need to watch more TechSNAP, Alan. How many times do we got to tell them?
Yep. According to a cybersecurity expert who works at a large retailer, who asked not to be named because he doesn't have permission to speak about this, says it is common for large retail operations to have a team that routinely monitors energy consumption and temperatures at stores to save on costs, particularly at night, and to alert store managers if temperatures in store fluctuate outside an acceptable range that could prevent customers from shopping at the store.
Want everybody to be comfortable.
Right. So, during the winter, it has to be warm enough in the store, and during the summer, it has to be cool enough that people aren't going to be feeling bad inside.
And I guess that requires, probably some temperature sensors on the outside of the building to determine, okay, what temperature are they coming in at? I mean, I'm sure there's a balance.
Right, things like that. But mostly, it probably makes more sense to have one company that has, an operations center and monitors every Target store, one company that monitors all the retail stores for a region, rather than having each store have a dedicated team of people who monitor the store overnight.
You'd think so, right?
Yeah. And so in this case, they seem to have network access to log in and make changes to the temperatures and the thermostat settings or whatever, and that it wasn't properly, isolated. Mm-hmm. It seems to me that if you were going to do this, you might look at doing a reverse tunnel instead. So there's no way to connect from outside into the HVAC system, but the HVAC system maybe VPNs out to the office of this HVAC controller company.
Yeah.
And that way, the controller company can access the HVAC system, but there's no way from the internet to get into the HVAC system.
PC Wiz in our live chat room wants to know if we would recommend Telnet. No. When I was working for a doctor's office, where obviously there's HIPAA and things to worry about, and they had a piece of equipment that would need troubleshooting from the vendor, they had a little D-Link VPN box, and the way this would work is you would go to this little D-Link VPN box. Well, first of all, what the doctor's office would do is we'd leave it unplugged all the time. And then when they needed it, we'd plug it in with a little power cord, and it was right where the gal who worked down by the computers could get to it. And then there was a web page she would go to say request support. They'd themed it, they'd done a custom branding. Yep. And request support, that would actually on the back end initiate a VPN connection to the vendor. They would see the VPN connected, and then they would call, or you'd have a call ahead of time to arrange it. And they would get they would get access over that tunnel, but it was initiated by the user for a support need. It wasn't always open. It wasn't always available. And that's kind of like what you're talking about, where the VPN initiates from the customer
always
side.
open, but yeah, that way. So it allow, normally with a firewall, you generally allow traffic out, but only specific traffic in.
Yeah.
And this way you allow no access into the HVAC system, but the HVAC system calls out and keeps this tunnel up, because if this company is going to monitor your HVAC 24/7, you need that link up all the time.
Yeah.
But, that still can expose a danger, right? If somebody breaks into the HVAC controller company, they can come into that tunnel.
Yep.
So the HVAC system still needs to be isolated. Like, there's no reason that that's not physically on a completely separate network.
Right. I mean, you as the IT administrator never know what's going on at the HVAC company. Maybe they have a disgruntled employee, they have somebody quit. Yep. I was just going through my notes the other day. I was cleaning out some of my Dropbox, and I was seeing, notes in here that I really, I know I still have details on some of my old clients' networks that if I ever wanted to do something inappropriate, I'd have a heyday. Like, there's not a really good structure people have in place for when vendors leave.
Well, and part of that is also that the network shouldn't be designed such that it relies on people not knowing how it's set up to keep it secure, right?
Yeah.
Like, knowing how it's set up shouldn't give you the ability to breach the network.
Right. It's just not going to last. It's not going to work forever.
Right.
Yeah.
Anyway, sources said that between November 15th and November 28th, which is Thanksgiving Day in the day before Black Friday in the States, the attackers succeeded in uploading their card-stealing malicious software to a small number of cash registers within the target stores. Those same sources said the attackers used this time to test that their point-of-sale malware was working as designed.
So on Thanksgiving Day, they're testing out their malware right before Black Friday.
Yep.
Wow.
Well, it looks like it started on the 15th. So they ramped up to be ready for Thanksgiving and Black Friday.
I mean, that's so incredible. Like, they knew they were just going to be the busiest shopping day ever. I mean, that's so brilliant. So devious.
Yeah. Well, some reports on the target breach said the stolen credit card data was offloaded via FTP communications to a location in Russia. Sources close to the case say much of the purloined financial information was transmitted to several drop locations. These are essentially compromised hosts in the United States and Europe and Russia, used to house the stolen data, where it could then safely be accessed by the perpetrators.
So Russia was just one of the many destinations.
Yeah, although they suspect the perpetrators were in Eastern Europe and or Russia.
Okay.
So basically, these compromised hosts serve as like cutouts, like in spy novels, right? You move the data from the target network, where everything might be getting logged, to this host, and so now the forensics will say the data went to this host over here, but then you go to that host and you can pull off the data, and once it's gone, you can destroy that host, right? You can erase it or corrupt it or just blow away the whole operating system maybe, depending on how much access you have to it. And because it's a compromised host, not like a rented server, there's no chain of evidence back to you. Once you erase those logs and stuff, then you're breaking the trail of breadcrumbs back to who did it. And that's why they use dump hosts like that.
This blows me away, because when you start hearing the details about how they did it, like, using the HVAC vendor's login, pre-deploying the malware to test it, using several drop locations, it honestly sounds like something that you or I could actually come up with. Like, we could, this sounds within our range of capabilities, so it doesn't take that much.
Well, it depends how they got the data, but yeah, they could have gotten the password. It seems that there was just a default password for the HVAC system.
Jeez.
And that maybe that same password let them get into multiple stores.
Probably. It's probably the same vendor managing many stores, right? So, and they have the same point of sale systems, the same software deployed everywhere. It's perfect.
Yeah. And so, it could have just been like insider stuff, right? They just compromised someone that works there, or someone who used to work at the HVAC vendor just went on the hack forum and said, hey, I happen to know that secret password that they don't change. Would anybody like to buy that for a few $1,000s?
Right. Yeah.
And that's the kind of stuff that can happen.
Yep. It's good. I'm a little. I sound like I'm a little impressed on one hand, because it's just it's evil genius, brilliant, and it actually seems very straightforward. And I'm also very happy we're getting some real quantifiable details that we can take as educational lessons from this.
Exactly.
And say, okay, we're not going to do that.
Things were kind of up in the air a little. It's like when we were talking about that BMC software.
Right. Yeah.
They were like, they're denying it do we believe them? And it turns out that yes, maybe it wasn't their fault.
Yeah, I mean, maybe they had some crappy system account password, but it's not really that software vendor's fault.
Right.
Yeah. Interesting. Now, any other thoughts on this one?
It's just more examples of bad practices, right? So it's not the HVAC vendor is not the only person who has a default vendor password, right? We've seen this happen on like 10 different devices now.
Yeah, I know. We see it happen all the time on this show. And it's kind of...
There's a secret account that if you just know the password for, it gives you root access on everybody's device.
I mean, the dirty secret, the dirty truth, really, it's not even a secret, is this is a systems network and administration podcast, and so often these vulnerabilities, a lot of the blame can be placed on the system administrators. Now, a lot of times, they have corporate pressures and politics they're struggling with and low budget, so it's not really their fault. But if their job would have been allowed to execute as it should, some of these things would have been prevented. Like, if they could have had somebody in there who was isolating this HVAC network, that would have saved Target hundreds of millions of dollars.
This HVAC network should have consisted of the HVAC system and a router that VPN'd out to or even allowed the VPN in. Really bad setup, but allowed
or put in a DMZ or something. I mean,
but it's just completely physically separate, so that a misconfiguration can't cause it to be compromised.
I wonder if the scale of deployment, so let's say, just for a rough number, Target has 100 stores, but it's a lot more than that. But let's say they have 100 stores. They have to replicate that solution 100 times. And if that meant 100 separate routers, 100 separate internet connections, they just don't want to do it. It's too much money.
But if the solution literally consists of a $50 D-Link, how is that not a problem?
Well, and there's a figure in here. Target right now could be facing losses of $420 million as a result of this breach. $420 million.
I don't know what those numbers are based on.
So it says that it's based on recovering the cost of the millions of cards, fines from the card brands and for non-PCI compliance, and direct Target customer service costs, including legal fees, credit monitoring, and tens of millions of customers impacted by the breach.
I guess, they would have to pay for the credit monitoring. And if some of the things they were doing were not PCI compliant, then the credit card issuers, which would be on the hook for all the fraud committed on these stolen cards, would then fine Target for it.
So. And here's the other thing, is that figure does not include estimates to take into account how much Target will spend in the run-up to implementing technology at their checkout counters to accept more secure chip and PIN credit and debit cards. In testimony before lawmakers on Capitol Hill yesterday, Target's executive vice president and chief financial officer said upgrading the retailer's systems to handle chip and PIN could cost them $100 million.
Depends on what they're changing, but
cheaper than 420.
You're right. Target was on the path to do chip and PIN like 10 years ago. We talked about this.
Yeah.
And it just seems like if they had just done that.
Now, Krebs notes that Target may be able to cover some of those costs through a mesh of network business insurance claims. Target has at least $100 million of cyber insurance and $65 million of directors and offers liability coverage too. So, but still, they're several $100 million. This is going to cost them $700 million, insurance or not.
Yep.
So you're right. When you talk about, this is what system administrators face. When you talk about the cost of replicating an isolated network with routers and independent internet connections 100 times or 400 times how many locations they have, I bet you it's not nearly as much as $420 million and the massive PR setback they have over this, right?
Well, it seems having a separate network for the HVAC system for every single Target store in North America should be able to be done for under $1 million if you don't count man hours and stuff.
You'd think so. Well, wow. Any other thoughts on that one?
No, that's about it for that one.
All right, Alan, I want to thank Ting.com, another sponsor of the TechSNAP program. Ting is mobile that makes sense. My mobile service provider, going on over a year now. I'm rocking the Nexus 5. That's my current phone. Loves it with the wireless charging. I bought this directly from the Google Play Store, and then I just bought a Ting SIM, popped it in there. Yeah, these Nexus 5s take SIMs. They got LTE and they got CDMA and GSM in the Nexus 5, which is great. And it's now I have a phone that I own outright with a Ting SIM in there, and I have no contracts and no early terminations with Ting, and I only pay for what I use. And guess what? If you go to techsnap.ting.com, you can get started, and you're going to want to go there because existing Ting customers just got a birthday present. It was Ting's birthday on Monday, and they're giving a gift to us. You're not going to believe it. Ting is slashing. They are slashing their data pricing massively. They've completely dropped the XXL plan. They've reduced the price on data across the board. What used to be $42 if you use like 2 gigabytes is now going to be $30, which is a great change. If you used a gigabyte, it used to be $24. It's now $19. Go to ting.com/blog. Actually, go to techsnap.ting.com. Then click on the blog link, and you can get more information about this. This was great. Because Ting doesn't have contracts, it's just pay for what you use. All existing Ting customers get this new rate starting their next billing cycle. You just get it as part of the Ting service. And all new customers get the new rate. You don't have to call up and renegotiate your contract and get another 2-year plan and maybe lose out on some sort of data special. No, you just get it as part of your Ting service. And what's great about Ting is every Ting plan includes tethering and hotspot. And now with these new data prices, it's more attractive than ever. And if you're an iPhone user, good news, Ting now has an iPhone app to let you manage your account, set up alerts, check your voicemail, turn voicemail on and off, disable the ability to make a call on a phone. You can now do that from the Ting dashboard. All kinds of great features are built right in. They also have a great Ting app for Android as well. Not to mention their web dashboard's incredible. And right now, Ting has some really good used Android phones. Go to techsnap.ting.com. That's going to take $25 off your first device. You can pick up a Samsung S2 for, ready for this, unlocked. You own it outright, $208 with no contract, no early termination fee. You pay for what you use, and the value of this lasts much longer than the standard plan where you're paying into it every single month. You're paying off that phone. You own it outright. So every minute you're using this phone, you're getting the absolute value out of it. They've also got a refurbished S3 Blue for $271. Unlocked. You own it, buddy. It's yours. And they've got brand new devices, too, like the HTC One, some Windows devices. And if you follow Ting on Google Plus today, it was a good day to be following them because they're giving away a Nexus 5. I think it's tomorrow. Yeah, they're going to do it tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern on Google Plus. They'll be giving away a Nexus 5. So if you're not following Ting on Google Plus, go circle them. They're Ting FTW on Google Plus, and if you're watching this live or you're watching this right after we released it, you might be able to get yourself a free Nexus 5. And now with those new data rates, man, it's never been a better time to go to techsnap.ting.com. Check them out. I've been telling you about them for a little while, and it just got better. My personal average bill is around $30 per month. A lot of that was data, and I think it's going to go down even more now, which I'm really excited about. I use the heck out of this phone for if I'm in the car, Waze is running. It's an amazing tool, and I love using it with Ting. So techsnap.ting.com, and a huge thank you to Ting for their awesome customer service, their longtime support of the TechSNAP program and the Jupiter Broadcasting Network, and thanks to all of our listeners out there who go visit Ting. I think you guys will really like them. And now with those new data rates, Ting just keeps getting better. And you know, what is really awesome about that new price is the way that worked out is, this is a little behind the scenes. I got a phone call with Ting before they announced this, so I knew ahead of time. And the way it worked out is they got a new deal with Sprint. That's their MVNO. And this is sort of the secret sauce to Ting, too, is because they let Sprint focus on the tower infrastructure. The Ting business is really focused on delivering great customer service and redefining what the mobile industry should do and charge. So Ting focuses on that, and Sprint focuses on the infrastructure, and Sprint's rolling out LTE to even more cities right now. They've just lit up more tri-band LTE. They're doing a huge expansive push there. Well, over the last 2 years, Ting has had a ton of growth. And so they're able to sit down at the table with Sprint and say, okay, guys, well, now we're bringing you X amount of business. Let's lower these data rates. Let's bring these down. And Ting, what they did is once they got that contract renegotiated with Sprint, instead of just keeping the data prices what they were at and making even more profits, they just passed that savings right on to the customers. They just took that new rate they're getting and passed it right on to you. They lowered their data rates, and they said, you know what, we're already making enough money. We're making good money right now. We're happy. Let's lower the rates. And they just passed it on to you. And they're going to keep doing that kind of stuff. And that's why I love Ting. So techsnap.ting.com, and a big thank you to Ting for sponsoring the TechSNAP program. Alan, it's time we talked a little bit about some Flash security, because there was like a crazy ninja update recently, right?
Well, just an emergency update, yeah. So Adobe announced an emergency patch for Flash Player because there's a flaw in it that was being exploited in the wild. So they issued a security advisory and released version 12.0.0.44. So it's for Windows and Mac, and 11.2.202.336 for Linux and FreeBSD.
Oh, good.
It also updates the bundled version in Chrome, which was 12.00.41, and Internet Explorer, which is 12.00.38. Both of them get updated to 12.00.44 as well. So it resolves an integer underflow vulnerability that could be exploited to execute arbitrary code on the affected system, CVE 2014-0497. Researchers Alexander Polyakov and Anton Ivanov of Kaspersky Labs discovered an exploit for the vulnerability being used in the wild and reported it to Adobe. Adobe's given no further details on how it was being exploited in the wild.
They don't like to do that, do they?
But since then, Kaspersky has done a post. They said, during the past months, we have been busy analyzing yet another sophisticated cyber espionage operation, which has been going on at least since 2007, infecting victims in 27 different countries. We've deemed the operation the Mask for reasons that we'll explain later.
Okay.
By later, they mean not in this document, but later on. The Mask is leveraging high-end exploits and extremely sophisticated malware, which includes a bootkit and a rootkit, and also affects Mac and Linux versions as well, not just Windows. And it's a customized attack against. It also has a customized attack against Kaspersky products, since they're used in a lot of higher-end security systems. They say this puts them on above Dooku in terms of sophistication. If you remember, Dooku was the successor to Stuxnet we talked about quite a while ago.
Yeah,
it makes it one of the most advanced threats at the moment. And they say more interesting, the author appears to be a native language that hasn't often seen in APT attacks. So normally, when they look at the APT, they're seeing U.S., China, and Russia as the native language of the people that are writing the viruses, right?
Yeah.
But for this particular attack, they're seeing a language they didn't expect or haven't seen very often. In a second post where they get into more technical detail about the exploit, they kind of let slip that it appears that the language in question is Korean.
Oh. Well, I mean, they have computers too, Alan.
Yeah. Of course, the Korean language covers both the ROK and DPRK, so it's hard to tell which side that was coming from.
Yep.
Although I have doubts about the sophistication of the DPRK.
I suppose so, yeah.
For people that don't know, DPRK is North Korea and ROK is South Korea. Anyway, they said they've found a total of 11 exploits. A lot of them seem to check what version of Windows you're running. And act differently in accordance.
Clever.
And they have shellcode that does a number of different things, depending on stuff. And some of them drop documents. Some of it is a little weird. They seem to be this combination of really sophisticated malware and then targeting really generic things, like some document here that's proclaims to be a list of the latest Japanese movies. And then another one that says how to use torrents.docx, which then contains an exploit. So it's a little weird that it's, you're seeing this sophisticated stuff and expecting like spear phishing and really complicated, and then it's just a Microsoft Office document claiming how to be a tutorial on how to use torrents that then infects your machine.
Well, everybody knows the best way to learn about using torrents is by downloading a Word doc off the internet.
But it also says that it contains 2 executables from one of the servers that the exploit was being served from, and they appear to include the Trojan agent CJUJ, which steals mailbox passwords from like Opera Mail, Opera, Firefox, Safari, IncrediMail, Pigeon, Thunderbird, etc. And it also steals data from forms in the login processes of Twitter, Facebook, Yandex, Mail.ru, LavaBit, Bitstring, GMX, Zoho, Mail.com.
Fastmail.fm is a popular one, too.
Yeah, Fastmail, Inbox.com.
Mail.lycos.
I don't think I've seen one of those in a while.
Login.yahoo.com, though.
My.screenname.aol.com.
Google.com/account/service login. That's legit.
Yep. Yeah, yep.
Yeah.
And it apparently sends them to mobilitysvc.com, or javaupdate.flashserve.net. Which are some interesting host names attempting to look legitimate.
Yeah. Well, gosh. I mean, there's nothing we can say on this one. Everybody knows not to download docs, and everybody knows that Flash is a vector for a lot of attacks. But
yep. So, importantly, update your Flash player, and you'll be okay.
Yeah, this is a good one to update for. And it sounds like we might get... There's a tease of additional details that we might get in a future released from them.
Kaspersky Labs is doing some kind of event.
You know what's
they're
interesting?
Having a summit or something, and it's going to be their keynote, I think.
Oh, so they're saving it for the big show. Yeah. Kaspersky is getting huge. You know, Kaspersky has a massive contract with, I don't know if it's the Russian government or who it's with, but a massive contract to protect the Olympics from cyber attack.
Mm.
Yeah, they have they have a mission control center at the Olympics right now where they have like all of these real-time monitorings, and they've set up like a remote Kaspersky office at the Olympics. It's like a full-fledged, massive, probably a multi-million-dollar contract. And
hopefully it's done better than the Super Bowl one, which we'll get to in the roundup.
Yes, no kidding.
But yes, Kaspersky is hosting the Security Analyst Summit in 3 days and 17 hours, apparently.
Oh, it's going to be hard for us to make it.
What country is DR?
Chat room will tell us. That's what we have a chat room for, Alan.
Does it say?
Could be the doctor country. I don't know.
It's in, what's it say? Punta Cana.
It's got to be a pretty dry conference, but then again, maybe it'll have some good stories that'll come out of it. So you never know. Chat room is totally...
Members of leading global companies, including
Dominican
Adobe...
Republic?
Yes. Nice tropical place. Adobe, Microsoft, Boeing, Barracuda Networks, Interpol, ITU, the World Bank, Team Simru, Shadow Server Foundation. Lots of really big names in computer security.
Yeah.
So.
Well, look up Kaspersky just getting huge, huh? They're becoming a leader. That's for sure. And it really kind of started with Dooku and some of those original. I mean, they've been big since then, but they really kind of blew up when some of that malware came on the scene.
Well, and they just have been
in
open sourcing a lot of their research, right? And it just makes you popular.
That's true. Isn't that a good point? That does help a lot. It's a good case for doing that. All right, Alan, any other thoughts on that story?
No, that's about it.
All right, well, then I want to thank GoDaddy.com, our third sponsor for this week's episode of the Linux Action Show. Did you see it? Did you catch GoDaddy's awesome new ad? I'll tell you about it here in a little second, but we do have a special promo just to celebrate the Super Bowl. It's going to wrap up in a couple of weeks, so use it now while you can. It's going to get 32% off anything new in your shopping cart. The new WordPress hosting, the new website builder, Office 365 hosted services where GoDaddy has really one of the best rates out there for this service. Maybe you need a cert, maybe you need a few domains. Use this promo code to get 32% off. Go 32 off 3. Go 32 off 3 to save 32%. Now, you know, GoDaddy's always had a huge presence with the Super Bowl. It's kind of what they've been famous for. They've been changing up. There's a new GoDaddy. They're getting very business focused, very team oriented, and I really liked their new advertising. And it's about Gwen. I'll play you a little clip of it here.
Hi kids, welcome to the show. What I love about puppeteering is the improv of it, the spontaneity, the losing yourself in a character, and really getting to be that character for that moment. If I had to describe one of my puppet shows, there's a little bit of madness and chaos and just getting out of the house and figuring out what puppets I wanted to bring. Kind of the excitement about who I'm going to see and what sort of venue it is. The stage just pops right up. And once I have the present theme up, then the puppets come and then I set up microphone, lights, and I'm ready to go. And then the show starts. The moment that I enjoy the best is when the kids forget that I'm there. They talk to the puppets and they have little mini conversations. It's magic, it really is. Well, my business is actually twofold. I do puppet shows, but I also make the puppets that you see. A coworker actually told me about GoDaddy, and I went there, and just like that, I had a website. Having a website has enabled me to do things that I wouldn't otherwise be able to do right at this point. I was able to immediately sell puppets, book things online. It has given me exposure to an audience that I never would have been able to afford to reach. We've done about 1,400 shows now. Roughly 90% were booked online. A GoDaddy website makes all the difference. There's a lot of satisfaction of having had a good show. And it is just icing on the cake when the kids go crazy at the end and give me, great standing ovations. I mean, what other profession would that happen? My name is Gwen Dean. I'm the owner of puppetsbygwen.com.
That's pretty cool. She quit her job on the Super Bowl to do that as her full-time business, and she used the GoDaddy website builder to get that started. There's lots of great stuff, and GoDaddy has sponsored so many of the shows: Linux Action Show, TechSNAP, Coda Radio on the Jupiter Broadcasting Network. They're a great sponsor, and I really like this new direction they're going in. So go support the TechSNAP program and go support GoDaddy by using that limited time offer. Go32 off 3 when you check out. Using that code lets GoDaddy know that you heard this ad right here on the TechSNAP program, and you appreciate them supporting TechSNAP, and a long-time sponsor, too. And really, they have made a lot of what we do here at the network possible. So Go32 off 3, and a big thank you to GoDaddy for sponsoring the TechSNAP program. Alan, is there anything else we want to cover in the news segment?
No, that's about it for the news.
All right, I got one quick thing I want to mention, just the Instagram feed, because we're getting so many cool photos of guys in their data centers. So if you like a little data center porn, go to Instagram.com/Jupiter Broadcasting. People are representing, showing their Jupiter Broadcasting swag, their shirts, and they're taking pictures. They know I love it. They're taking pictures in their data center or with their rig set up. Alan, there's a little BSD Now action and TechSNAP action in this one shot. This guy's an Alan fan. You can go see everybody's shirt pictures and see the pictures of not just in the data centers, but other places too at Instagram.com/Jupiter Broadcasting. But Alan, with the news all done, that means it's time for the TechSNAP feedback. Thanks for sending your emails to TechSNAP@JupiterBroadcasting.com or popping that contact link at the top of the Jupiter Broadcasting website. Or even better, starting a thread in our subreddit over at links.techsnap.tv. And Alan, our first email this week comes in from Daniel. Are you ready, sir?
Yep.
Here we go. He says, hey guys, I'm in a bit of a quandary. I have 6 isolated environments that sit outside of the corporate firewall that doesn't have access to the central authentication systems. Besides myself, the smallish team of less than 10 developers that need limited access to my systems. Currently, I use a base station host behind the firewall whose access is limited by LDAP group membership that users log into first and then SSH into an external environment. The devs then use sudo to get shell as a common user whose SSH public key is on all of the servers in the external environment. Once out in the environment, their common users have a restricted set of commands for viewing configs and logs and restarting certain services via sudo. To minimize headaches for those users, I don't require a password with sudo. The biggest downside of using the common user in the environment is that I've lost the ability to track activity to a particular person. Since there are multiple, mouse is in the way, hold on. Since there are multiple small, isolated environments of less than 15 servers that are meant to exist independently of each other, I think an LDAP infrastructure is overkill. I use Chef to manage the systems, and I could manage individual users with that. If I want to require passwords for sudo, I would have to know the user's passwords to get them into Chef and manually rotate their passwords for them when their scheduled rotation comes around. As it is now, I rotate the SSH key pair on a set schedule as well when someone leaves the team. Should I just suck it up and manage individual users via Chef, or can you guys think of some way I can track activity of users from the base station? Thanks, Daniel.
Okay. The first problem there with his description of, the first problem is that Chris said base station when he meant bastion host. But anyway.
Oh yeah, that's my eyesight.
The guy when he's talking about doing Chef, he was talking about having to put the password in plain text. You're doing it wrong. The correct way is to specify the password hash in the config file, right? So when I configure users with Puppet, we have the SHA-512 crypt string. Which is obviously you can't turn that back into the password, right? It's the string that is actually stored in the password file on the operating system. So you can easily specify that with the command line when you create the user or whatever. So that way users could set a password on, say, the Bastion host for their account, and then you could just extract the hash for that and then put it in your Chef config and push that out to all the hosts. And that allows the users to have what they want that way. And you might even be able to make it smart enough so it could pull the password off the Bastion host so that, when they change the password on the Bastion host, it would change it on the external machines.
Yeah.
Or you could just, mandate a password changing policy or something. But so that would be the easiest way to do it. LDAP isn't all that much setup. With 15 boxes at each place, it might be worth it. But the easiest way is with Chef, and you can avoid having to know each person's password by using the hash instead.
So you're not liking the one generic account thing. That's not
not at all. And neither is him.
Yeah, he's not. He knows it's not. He knows it's not right. Yeah, that's a good point.
But in the case where you do have to do that, for example, in Windows, when there's only the one administrator account or whatever, we've talked about it before, but this company in Poland called Wheel Systems makes the Fudo, Fudo, which is basically specifically for this type of thing. Each person would have a login on the Fudo where they log in, and then only through the Fudo can they log into the shared account. The difference is the Fudo runs ZFS encrypted file system and logs everything they do and cryptographically signs it with timestamps. So then you can go back and see everything everybody did and find the bad thing that happened and figure out who did it.
That's nice.
So it's kind of like he has this bastion host, except for this one is specifically designed to log everything that's done. It supports SSH, RDP, and VNC.
That's probably, I mean, if you
Capsicum and all this stuff. It's a really, really tight security appliance.
I think I just read base station. I thought, okay, he means like a host in his DMZ that people start. It's like the base. I don't know what I was thinking.
Well, that's basically what he was talking about.
I guess I don't know what I read. My brain is weird today.
Yeah, but it's basically
I like the Fudo box. I think that'd be perfect.
Yeah, well, they're expensive, though.
Yeah.
So the other option is, if he just uses Chef and he can push it out with a hashed password instead of trying to specify the password in plain text, and then problem solved.
All right, so while we're kind of on the topic of management systems, Chris, great name, writes in. He says, "Hey, Alan and Chris, I've started using Puppet for deployment, and I have found it to be a great tool, but I have a question about what to do with temporary hosts. The infrastructure for my web app has a few nodes which are relatively permanent, the database and the caching servers, for example, get configured and they stay on indefinitely. However, the approach I take for deploying application server updates is to spin up a fresh new VM with the new code and then destroy the old nodes after confirming the new nodes are working correctly. With Puppet, the process of choosing a unique hostname for each new agent and subsequently signing the CSR for that new agent on the master are a fairly manual process, at least as far as I can see. Automatically signing all new CSRs or ignoring the certificate entirely doesn't seem logical from a security perspective. I want to know if you've encountered this challenge before, and if so, have you solved it? The best solution I can come up with is performing these manual tasks in some third-party host. But I'm still fairly new to Puppet, so I don't know if perhaps there is something in the platform itself that addresses this. Thanks, Chris."
Well, it's funny he should mention that, because in the newest version of Puppet that just came out, they kind of solved this problem.
Yay!
Specifically in 3.4, they added the feature to do custom data in your certificate signing request, and also do policy-based certificate auto-signing. So what this does is Puppet can now use site-specific logic to determine or to decide which certificate signing request should be auto-signed. This feature is based on custom executables, which can examine each CSR as it arrives and use any decision-making criteria you choose. So prior to Puppet 3.4, Puppet would accept a whitelist of nodes whose requests could be auto-signed. So in older versions, you could say, star.webserver.mydomain.com would get auto-signed. And if that was good enough for you, then you could do that. So that would work for him. Or he could do this new one where he could have, when he deploys Puppet in the image, he could make it add a certain attribute or something to his certificate signing request. And then when the Puppet master saw that, it would know, oh, this is a temporary web server. Right. I'm going to auto-sign this so it can get into production right away.
That makes sense.
Yeah. I'm looking at doing something like this because currently I manually sign, and that's okay for the host system. But for each of the jails that pop up, I would like to auto-sign those. Because I have based on host names, but I don't want it to happen that somebody else could connect to my Puppet master, pretend to be, something.videocdn.scaleengine.net and get into my Puppet thing because it has the license key for the video software we use. And so we want to make sure that's only going to the machines we want it to. So we're looking at doing something similar.
It's an interesting. I could see how it could definitely become a problem with jails.
You can set it up for auto signing of only specific things or a subset of hosts based on different things.
Perfect. Very nice. There you go. Good luck, Chris. Okay. Next email, Alan, comes in and it's about FreeNAS. And speaking of jails, I have a FreeNAS Mini Plus from IX Systems, and it rocks. Hey-oh! I just upgraded to 9.2 last week. My question is about the jails. I'm running the Plex OwnCloud, Transmission, and Sickbeard plugins. So what is the best practice or a best way to get the individual jails to be able to see files from each other? He's got an example here. I want to run the CrashPlan plugin as my backup, but I need to be able to see the MP3 photos and videos inside the Plex jail in order to back them up. Is this a security risk, letting them crosstalk or read the files, or do I just need to make a folder at the root of the ZFS that is 777 so that any other jail can access it? Anyways, keep up the good work on TechSNAP. I've been a listener since episode 1. Matt, what a great question.
Yeah, although part of it is a lack of understanding. But the way the Plex plugin works is you have Plex in the jail, and then you mount part of your or all of your ZFS into the jail.
Yep.
So the video files don't actually live in the Plex jail. They live in your ZFS storage on the FreeNAS. So you would just have to set up a second NullFS mount of that data set of your videos into the CrashPlan jail. I'm sure the CrashPlan plugin already supports that, because otherwise, by default, the CrashPlan plugin wouldn't have access to any files.
It'd just be backing up itself, yeah.
Right. So yeah, you just have to specify what you want to be exposed into the CrashPlan jail, and if you just do the root, then that's it'll back up the files you want it to.
So yeah, so each jail is essentially doing an NFS mount itself to the ZFS.
Not NFS, NullFS, which is basically. Yeah, unless you mount, it's like I forget what it's called in Linux, but when you can mount the same file system in multiple places.
Okay, I see.
So I have the way jails work with EasyJail, which is unrelated to FreeNAS, is that there's one copy of the operating system called the base jail, and then you just NullFS mount that into each jail,
aka a bind mount.
Apparently, that's what it's called in Linux, because it makes no sense in Linux.
Well, if you would have said bind mount, I probably would have known what you meant.
Yeah, but what does that even mean? Or a NullFS mount it's a NullFS transform, meaning it's a file system driver that does nothing and just mounts. It's just a pass-through layer.
Dang pragmatic BSD on. I got nothing.
Exactly.
All right.
But yeah, so you just got to set it up so you can just. All the files are actually stored on your ZFS pool, and then the plugins just get access to those, so you can just change what they have access to. I'm not sure how to do it exactly off the top of my head, but I'm sure the FreeNAS forums will explain how to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a common request. Reddit.com/r/FreeNAS has some good write-ups on that, too.
Ooh, cool.
Harsh writes in, I don't actually think that's how you say his name, but that's how you'd read it in English. He says, hello, Chris and Alan. I'm a regular listener of TechSNAP, and thanks for the wonderful show. Various stories about theft of credit cards and debit card information have raised a few questions in my mind. Usually, when I use my debit card, I'm redirected from the merchant site to a payment gateway where I enter the details of my card. The payment gateway then redirects me to my bank site, and I enter my password. Number 1. Do the merchant sites or the payment gateway save my card information? And if they do, then why? If this is a one-time purchase, then why do they need to save this information at all? And number 2, as I have to enter my password at the bank site to complete the payment, so does it matter if my card's data is stolen and not the password? Thanks for the great show. Keep up the great work.
It depends on a lot of things. That's a pretty unusual setup.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for debit cards, it makes a little more sense, but it also reminds me of like verified by Visa.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a couple of things. Debit cards are different than credit cards. Part of the reason why they might have to store it is if you ever need a refund, they need the card number to do the refund. But a lot of times when you have the store and then it redirects you to a payment gateway, it means that the store website will only ever store a token, which basically just an identifier that the payment gateway gives the store, so the store can refer back to that credit card without actually knowing the credit card number. Right? That way the store doesn't have to be PCI compliant, right? Because all they're storing is this identifier, and then the payment gateway is the guys that do the PCI compliance and store the encrypted credit card.
In the age of millions of online vendors, that's a pretty nice, not having to be PCI compliant is a pretty nice thing.
Yeah, so Stripe is really good for that. Stripe.com is who I use for that.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it depends. There's a lot of different scenarios. With a debit card, it's a little different because, if you have to enter a password every time, you can't do things like monthly billing that you do with a credit card. And that's why a lot of places have to store a credit card is, like at Scale Engine, we store your credit card because we bill you every month.
Mm-hmm.
But, we do it securely. So it depends. In the case you're talking about, the store is unlikely to store the credit card number. The payment gateway may or may not. I don't know the details with the debit card specifically. And then your bank is the password. If the processor is storing the credit card, it may still be possible for them to be compromised and then someone to make a fake card with your card information on it. Now, they're not getting the whole magnetic stripe, so they don't have as much data.
Right.
But, if you have the debit card number and the PIN number, then you can do quite a bit.
Yeah.
But without the PIN number, the debit card's not supposed to be that usable. And that's why, in Canada and the UK, we've switched to having credit cards that have a PIN number. That way, if the credit card number is stolen, you still don't have the PIN number. But you generally don't use the PIN number for online transactions, only in-person transactions.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But that's why there's separate systems like Verified by Visa, where after you do the first half of the credit card transaction to authorize it, you get redirected to your bank where you enter your password. Although that'd be a great spot for some phishing.
Uh-huh.
Right? So if you were like a email provider, or an email spammer, then, you're selling like weight loss pills or something, and then you do a fake Verified by Visa and you get redirected to the fake bank site.
I might fall for that.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you're not buying weight loss pills out of spam, but
you never know, Alan. Sometimes I get a crazy night. You just never know.
The problem there is that I've Verified by Visa adoption. I've used Verified by Visa maybe twice on my card.
Yeah.
I don't even know if it's still set up since my card's expired twice since the last time I've used it.
I've played with the Verified by MasterCard thing, like on Newegg, and the problem I ran into was it didn't support the complexity of my password that I wanted. Like I had to.
Yeah, mine was same restriction as my online banking, so it was limited to 12 characters and no special characters.
Mine was limited to 8 and no special characters. 8 characters and no special.
Damn you, mainframe!
And I'm like, listen, I don't want to do this at this point. And yeah.
Exactly, because once you do a transaction with that, it lowers the amount of liability protection you get. So.
Interesting.
So it really depends on the setup of stuff. And at some point, it might be nice to see sites actually specifying how much data they're storing and so on.
Gosh, no kidding, right? And then I can make the informed decision if I want to have my data stored there.
Right, because if you go to places like Stripe, then they're giving you a token, and that way you can store the token and do recurring billing, like monthly billing, by just reusing that token, and they store the credit card, not you, so you don't have to worry about your database.
Yeah.
So as a merchant, it makes your life a lot easier.
Yeah. Yeah, it's peace of mind, too. Yeah, exactly. All right, well, good. So don't worry if your questions didn't get answered in this episode. We're doing another episode in just a few minutes, and we got a whole nother batch of questions in there. So make sure you tune into episode 149 of TechSNAP if you didn't get your question answered, because you might just get it answered in that one. And don't forget, we need more questions now, so go over to jupiterbroadcasting.com, click that contact link, and then choose TechSNAP from the drop-down. And in 2 weeks, right? 3 weeks? We'll have a new episode with those.
No, 2 weeks. Yeah, 2 weeks.
Yeah, okay. Time math, Alan. But with the feedback all done, that means it's time for the TechSNAP Roundup. Welcome to the TechSNAP Roundup. Yeah, that's what that crazy music means. Now, the Roundup are stories that just didn't quite fit at the top of the show, but we still want to talk about them and give you some links to follow up on your own after the show. And some of these links came from our subreddit over at links.techsnap.tv. Alan, I think our first one's a bit of a joke, but it was too funny to pass up. This Microsoft is really dominating the tech headlines this week with their CEO changeup, and Bill Gates is retaking a role at Microsoft as a technology leader. And according to the New Yorker, Bill Gates' first day at work in his newly created role as technology advisor got off to a bit of a rocky start as the Microsoft founder struggled for hours to install the Windows 8.1 upgrade. The installation hit a snag early on, sources said, when Mr. Gates repeatedly received an error message informing him that his PC ran into a problem that could not handle and needed to restart. After failing to install the upgrade by lunchtime, Mr. Gates summoned the new Microsoft CEO, Satya Nadella, I used to be able to say that, who attempted to help him with the installation with no success. While the two men worked behind closed doors, one source described the situation as tense. Bill's usually a pretty calm guy, so it was weird to see him use some of that language coming out of his mouth, one source said. Yeah, I think this is crap. First of all, Bill Gates doesn't set up his own computer, I'm guessing. The time that man would spend setting up his...
in most corporate environments, yeah, the IT, you're not allowed to set up your own computer.
I think literally the time it would take him to set up that computer would be more than one person at Microsoft's yearly salary. So it's probably not a best use of employee resources. But that was a fun way to note the occasion here on the TechSNAP program, that a new leader at the helm of Microsoft, and this guy, Alan, this guy that's taking over at Microsoft, he's coming from their Azure background, their cloud services background.
Oh.
You know, so I think that you're going to see a new direction. I mean, not a new direction, but a new focusing on that kind of stuff at Microsoft.
Nonsense?
And enterprise and and Azure. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
it's like that puff piece we saw not long ago about how they use Azure to battle malware.
Right.
Because they can spin up a computer whenever they need. It's
right.
like, sure. Have fun with that.
Our next story kind of picks up on a quick footnote we had on our Target story, why the U.S. doesn't have chip and PIN credit cards yet.
Right. In the wake of the Target security breach story, there's been a lot of talk about, well, why doesn't the U.S. have EVM chip and PIN cards? Back quite a few years ago, Target looked at doing this, but after a pilot program decided against it. And basically, the main thing that EMV is supposed to protect against is fraudulent cards, where people use stolen data and put it on a card. And that wasn't really happening a lot until just recently. So, the amount of money it would cost to do it was deemed not worth it.
Yeah, they didn't see a problem at the time.
See, in Europe, it was different. Because they have so many separate countries, like the U.S. states, it was harder for law enforcement to go between those countries. And so preventing the fraud was a bigger risk, right? Because it was harder to track people down when they're leaving the country and things like that, right? Also, in Europe, they didn't have, because they were behind, they had second mover advantage, right? They didn't have as many of the regular magnetic stripe machines. So those machines didn't have to be replaced with more expensive PIN machines. They were going straight to chip and PIN, right? It's the same reason why their Wi-Fi network or their wireless, like mobile phone networks, are better, because they're newer. Whereas in the States, they built sooner, and so they're on older technology.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Now, that's not the only excuse for why the U.S. and Canada have really bad mobile networks, but
maybe the U.S. can now. Maybe now the U.S. has an opportunity to overreact and overspend and have lots of people capitalize on this problem.
Or rather, leapfrog the problem. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. Wouldn't that be nice if they just leapfrogged it?
Well, yes and no, right? If they come up with some system better than EVM or EMV, the problem is compatibility with other cards, right? One of the other reasons why EMV took off so big in Europe was that, if you had a card in France, you wanted it to work in Germany, right?
Yes,
so it had to be the same.
Of course.
Whereas most Americans don't really travel outside of the States very often.
Right. And
the
when
ones
we
that do are maybe those people will get the more expensive cards.
Yeah, or we'll just get cashier's checks, or we'll make preparations for travel. Yeah.
Right. Whereas in Europe, it's like traveling between states because they're so small.
Yeah.
So it's just a different scale.
Yep.
And so that's why there were different pressures that made it a more obvious choice in Europe than in
It's interesting how geography will impact the technical decisions like that. Okay, the next story in the roundup.
It's a good analysis of
the
some
chip
of the
and pin
questions
situation.
behind that. Yep.
The next story in the roundup we haven't seen confirmed on any major news publication, and it really just comes from a forum thread on Skype's official support forum. So take it with a grain of salt, but it's something to maybe be concerned about. It certainly seems quite possible. The forum heading is Skype ads and rotation have been compromised. And there's a lot of posts in here about people who are noticing malware being delivered via the in-ad Skype's ad system. And people have noticed, too, that some of these are JavaScript, some of these are Flash. And so just the basic question has been raised, why does the Flash client even display JavaScript and Flash for the ad? Why is it not a static image that when you click on it, it sends you to a URL? Or even a GIF, right? It doesn't have to have JavaScript and Flash support.
Well, it depends on how fancy the advertisers want to be.
I suppose so.
But so Skype has ads embedded in since version 5 or 6, I forget. And those use an advertising network, just like every website. And, oftentimes people can submit ads to be displayed on the advertising network, and not every single ad gets reviewed by a person to make sure it's not malicious. Or if it gets a review, it's very cursory, right? They're not looking at it to make sure it's going to do what they expect. And so people are noticing the they're on Skype and an ad would come up and it would pop up their browser because the script, whether it's JavaScript or whatever, in the ad would be calling an external URL. And that would cause their browser to start.
Yep. This guy here wrote...
And then that browser could be loading a malicious page that takes advantage of, say, a Flash exploit or a Java exploit.
This user wrote on the Skype forum, he says, I was in a Skype call with my sister, and we both had the following page appear in our browser, and he links to this crazy, obviously crappy URL. He says, it returned an internal 500 error when the page loaded in our browser. However, both my sister and I were in a Skype call together when this happened. Both my sister and I were affected at the same exact time. And he says Skype is now using intrusive advertisements on top of that. So has Skype's ad system been compromised? Maybe. Is another piece of malware hijacking that on their systems? Maybe. Is there nothing going on? We don't know yet. We haven't seen it reported anywhere else.
It's more likely just an ad got pushed out into the Microsoft ad network without enough oversight.
We've talked about how this can happen a lot.
This happened on lots of ad networks all the time. And that's why, ad networks are kind of struggling between, the volume of ads they want to have, having new ads all the time and stuff, and verifying each ad to make sure it doesn't contain anything malicious.
Alan, our next story on the roundup proposes that 2014, the year of encryption and the summer of key management. I can get behind that.
Yeah, it's a story over SE Magazine, and it just talks about, 2013 was the year of trust is gone. 2014 is about encryption, and that coming with that is the fact that people are going to have to start looking at key management, right? And we've seen talk about like SSH keys laying around all over the place and all kinds of other stuff. And if you're going to encrypt everything, you have to manage the keys, because if you lose the keys, you can't read that encrypted data, right? And if you expose the keys, then everybody can read the encrypted data, and you kind of wasted your time encrypting it.
Yeah. Sure that.
So it's really important to do proper key management. And I think a lot of people will be learning that soon, because a lot of people rush to encrypt their stuff and didn't back up their keys well enough, and are one day going to lose that key somehow and not be able to decrypt their data and going to be very upset.
That's going to be a hard lesson to learn.
Yeah, so that's why you should probably start looking at it now and back up those keys, but back them up in a way that's secure, right? Because if you back it up on a USB stick and then lose it, how do you know that someone hasn't compromised that key? Or also, what good is the backup if you can't find it?
True that. It's no good. Our next story comes thanks to Q5sys on our subreddit, and this was I saw this one floating around right before the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl, Alan, here in the United States was considered I don't even know what this means, but it was declared a level 1 national security event. Hundreds of thousands of security professionals were there, planes in the sky, unbelievable precautions, and so CBS was fawning all over the security state and was trying to get behind-the-scenes exclusive footage, and they're shooting the security center, and right there up on a big screen with all these camera feeds is the Wi-Fi access password right there, and it was broadcast on CBS this morning on their national morning news show.
Yep. Now, it's not clear how far that Wi-Fi network extended, right? Or how far that security office was from the Super Bowl, or how hard it would be someone to jump on that network, or exactly what was exposed on that network, right? That could have just been to get your phone on the internet to get your email or whatever. But yeah, it's obviously not a great way to distribute your Wi-Fi information. And if you're going to do it that way, don't let cameras in the room.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times they stage
in this particular case, because it's short-lived enough, right? That Wi-Fi network probably doesn't exist anymore, or doesn't have anything useful on it now. And if this report airs a couple hours before the Super Bowl, that doesn't give someone who does manage to see that and didn't know it was going to happen very much time to take advantage of it.
We've talked too about how social engineering and if you want to compromise the security of a place, a lot of times just acting like you belong there gives you the ability to compromise the security way beyond what you'd think. And so even at a national security event, a level 1 national security event, somebody was able to walk right past all of the Super Bowl's checks, all of the screenings they did. He put an old badge on from a couple of years ago and just told everybody whenever he got asked, I was really busy this morning, I grabbed my old badge. So at the Super Bowl, when they were talking to the MVP player from the Super Bowl, a 9/11 truther breaks in. Check this out, Alan. I got a little clip here.
Myself making great plays, but never think about being MVP. investigate 9/11. 9/11 was perpetrated by people within our own government.
And then they pull him off. So this guy walks through the entire Super Bowl. He gets past all of the security. He walks up to the media. He gets up to the MVP giving his post-game speech. And he takes the microphone and does that. All of that security. And the guy bypassed it by acting like he belonged there. And how many times have we sit here on the TechSNAP program that sometimes all it takes to compromise a network is pretend like you belong there, and then you have physical access. And that's exactly what that guy did. He just didn't.
And if he had a more, sinister motive, that could have been a big thing.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, let's talk about this mystery signal from a helicopter. What's this about?
So a Finnish hacker was just watching something on YouTube, and he got this recommended video, which was a car chase, like a police chase from somewhere in the States. And he was watching it, and he noticed this really weird background noise. And he thought it was just, from the engines or something. But when he listened a little more closely, it seemed very consistent. You can kind of hear that.
Sounds like a helicopter.
Right, but you hear that other sound.
Yeah, I do.
And apparently it's only in the left channel. So when he isolated the channels. So by subtracting the two channels from each other, he was able to get a clear feed on it.
Yeah.
And when he analyzed it some more, he found that it seemed to have a pattern. And he analyzed it some more, and eventually found out it was GPS coordinates.
And why would that be in the recording?
And he was able to draw them up. Well, in this case, it was the traffic copter sends a stream of his GPS coordinates back so they can plot where it is on a map. So they can show like a live map of where the helicopter is, like on the screen when they're, showing the car chase. They can show the path and stuff.
Oh, I guess the YouTube viewer was a she.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Jack
I didn't.
Or somebody points out.
It just said Finnish hacker. Yeah. It's usually not very specific.
So then did she use that? She drew up these maps?
Yeah, you can see the maps.
That is amazing. So then she took those GPS coordinates and mapped it over a Google Earth map here, and you can see the route that the helicopter took. That looks
And then somebody
awesome.
pointed out that it's just weirdly encoded ASCII, and if she figured that out, it would have been even easier, because instead of having to try to figure out how it was encoded, it literally was just the text of like N09 or N390386 West 09, right? But
it's 7-bit Bell 202 ASCII.
Right, where if it had just been regular ASCII, she probably would have picked it up a little sooner.
Yeah. Interesting what can be hidden in a little bit of noise, huh?
Yep. And so, this wasn't as big a deal as I thought it was originally, but, interesting find just as something you just happened to come across.
On YouTube.
On YouTube.
Yeah. Well, this next story kind of sucks for Yahoo Mail users. Yahoo is sending out some password resets after some accounts were compromised, but it doesn't necessarily sound like the compromise was at Yahoo itself. Attackers behind the cracking campaign used usernames and passwords that were probably collected from a compromised database belonging to an unidentified third party, according to Jay Rossler, who is a Yahoo Senior Vice President of Platforms and Personalization Products. He says, our ongoing investigation shows that malicious computer software used a list of usernames and passwords to access Yahoo Mail accounts. The information sought in the attack seems to be names and email addresses with the affected accounts and the most recent emails.
Yep. So in this one, what it appears to be is something we've seen before. Some website or forum or whatever gets compromised, and it has username, password, and email address. So the first thing you do is try that email address with that password and see if you get in.
Yep.
And so they did this, and so Yahoo notices all these users logging in from a weird place and a bunch of failed passwords, but mixed in with a lot of successes. Or, the same IP address just logged into 10,000 different accounts or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so they reset the password on all the affected accounts. But it's likely that however somebody got this list of Yahoo addresses, they also got addresses for other email providers. And so, if your email provider isn't as big and they don't notice this, then your email could be compromised and you don't know it. Although in this case, it looks like the attackers may have only just targeted Yahoo, because if they're going to have to write software to scrape your address book or whatever, they can only target so many providers at once. But it's very likely the same thing would be happening with Hotmail and Gmail. So I might expect to hear a similar announcement from Google around the same time saying hey, we detected this as well.
Folks, go proactively change your password. Hey, Alan, you know who likes malware? Because you and I don't like malware.
Well, more importantly, don't use the same password for your email address as you use for anything else ever.
Yeah. The FBI is willing to pay for malware. So if you got some, Just call them up. I'm sure they'll just give you some money for it.
Well, actually, it's not quite that.
No.
They put out a request for proposals or request for bids or request for a quote, it turns out, looking for someone that will provide basically a steady stream of malware. So this seems like, companies like Symantec and Kaspersky run websites where researchers can submit malware to be analyzed and stuff. And basically it seems that the FBI wants to pay someone to give them that. It's like, well, Kaspersky already does this. And so, like Symantec has, I think, virustotal.com, or maybe that's a completely separate entity. Actually, yes, I think VirusTotal is separate from all the providers and just they feed it to all of the antivirus companies. So it seems like it'd be easy for the FBI to just get that, for free. But apparently they're looking for someone to bundle it up into a package and sell it to them. Yeah. But they want a roll-up of shareable malware as included in the malicious URL report, sorted by the SHA-1 hashes, updated once every 24 hours, be a snapshot of the malware from the last 24 hours, be on average 35 gigabytes per day, which just seems like a random arbitrary figure. Because, malware can be big or small and, generally compressible and weird stuff. Executable file types for Unix, Linux, Windows, and Macintosh.
Hey-o.
Archive files, image files, Office documents, audio and visual files, RTF files, PDF, PHP, JavaScript, HTML. Can you even infect a rich text file? I thought the whole point was that it didn't contain anything executable.
I wonder, why couldn't they just call up their buddies at the NSA who are buying these things up by the thousands?
Well, they want all of them. Like, they're looking for the lower end stuff, I think, mostly, not necessarily the higher end stuff. But it just seems like there's better ways to get this than, basically this sounds like a contract specifically designed for a specific defense contractor to pick it up and sell it to them.
Absolutely. And I love how we just continue to feed that monster too. Like, we just keep shoveling money.
Yeah. They want to be able to retrieve a feed in an automated way through machine-to-machine communications. It just sounds like somebody built this and then somebody at the FBI wrote the specs so that only one vendor's product would match.
And in some cases, the actual vendor even writes the RFP. I mean...
initiation of accessing the feed shall be pulled by the IAU, not pushed to the IAU.
Oh, interesting. So I'm pulling up the document right now, and I wonder why this is. So on the Macintosh, the Pages program that reads Word documents, it will notify you if the document wants to open your contacts. Now, why the hell would this want access to my contacts? That seems really strange.
Seems like it shouldn't.
Yeah, it seems like it shouldn't. Anyways, yeah, so they actually have the RFQ linked in the in that article there, and I'm looking at it right now. Yeah, okay, I think somebody wrote this for them. I think you're right, Alan.
Well, and also the fact that it apparently price quotes and descriptions of capabilities are due by February 14th. Seems like a short window.
Sure does, doesn't it?
Yeah. Unless somebody wants unless somebody already has this built, how are they going to necessarily do that?
Right. Well, this one's caught me by surprise. The British intelligence agency, the GCHQ, has used DDoS tactics against Anonymous, new Snowden leaks show. And not only that, but they've also gone after the anonymous chat rooms and chat servers, tried to infiltrate them and get in there and monitor them for information. This was a leak that came. I don't know which publication originally ran it, but now it's being held on GigaOM, NBC, the CBC. Everybody's running the story today and yesterday. And it's one of the first examples we have of the GCHQ actively going after some of these hacker groups and essentially attacking them and doing DDoSes against them. What we bust them for and arrest them for, we're doing to them. Which is, sometimes you got to, I guess, be the bad guy to get the bad guy. Covered a little bit more detail in this week's Unfiltered, but I thought one of the things that what jumped out at me was they also went after LulzSec, and apparently the GCHQ coordinated with the NSA to teach the NSA some of their tricks. So the GCHQ was schooling the NSA on some of this stuff.
Yeah. Apparently, from an unrelated story that I don't have the link to handy, there was also one of the DDoS attacks was actually directed at QuakeNet, which is a big IRC network that is trying to do, legitimate stuff, and just happened that some anonymous people congregated in a chat room there, and that resulted in them getting taken down at possibly a large cost to them and their ISPs and disruption to, legitimate businesses just to block some anonymous people from using IRC.
Oh man, if we work
And they
quick,
could easily have just gone to a different IRC network.
if we work quick, we could probably come up with a good conspiracy about that Freenode outage recently. I bet we could come up with something good.
Possibly.
So you want to tell us about NSA Operation Orchestra?
Yeah, this was the closing keynote from FOSDEM, the big open source software in, I don't remember where it is, somewhere in Europe. The closing keynote was Orchestra, a fictitious NSA briefing. It was given by Paul Honeycamp of the FreeBSD project. And, you know, he invented Varnish, the web cache that lots of websites use.
We love.
And anyway, he says, what is this? It's a fictitious NSA briefing that he gave as a closing keynote for FOSDEM. The intent was to make people laugh and think, but I challenge anybody to prove that it is untrue.
So it's stuff he made up, but they could be doing.
That no one can prove they aren't already doing.
Okay.
So Operation Orchestra was about reducing the cost of communications intelligence collection. And they did this by looking at eliminate, reduce, or prevent encryption, or enable access and frustrate the players. Right? So the internet has got out of the control of the NSA, and it's outside regulatory reach, and it's hard to collect data because people have non-static routing and stuff like that, right? So a couple of different things: gain control of key leverage points like ISPs, influence the process to their advantage, and then identify low-cost, high-impact persons, individual people they can go after that might make a big difference. So problem, the smart inventor. Somebody comes up with an idea that would make communications intelligence collection harder or more expensive. What do? Old school's tactics were to persuade or bribe the inventor to stop doing that, classify the patent so they can't use it, swear people to secrecy. There's lots of paperwork, it leaves a trail, involves many people. So let's not do that. So Operation ABBA, exploit raw capitalism, throw money at the problem.
Yay! That does sound like what they're doing.
So some of the things they've done is spot a startup which could cause trouble by you reading Reddit or Hacker News or whatever. Make informal contact by pretending to be a venture capitalist. It's like, hey, I saw you on Hacker News. I'm rich. I'll drop by. After a couple of visits to gather intelligence, then you can, drop $10,000 or more on the person and take them out to fancy dinners and
Get
stuff
some
like that.
better chairs, as he puts it.
Yeah. Yeah. So like you meet with somebody and you're like, here, take a bunch of money, get some better chairs and stuff. And, it kind of makes them feel like there's a bottomless pit of money they can get.
Yeah.
Right. So then you locate a patent that's near their business idea and either drop the patent holder a hint, so they'll try to go after the startup directly if they're a friend of the NSA, or indirectly if they're not. Once they get the startup guys get visit from patent lawyers, that'll kill the startup. And, the VC will call back and be like, we don't think we want to do this anymore because of the patent or whatever. If the patent is not already in good hands, attempt to locate a better patent or inspire a patent transfer to good hands. Typical cost, $30,000. Startup foiled.
Right.
Or Operation Pasadena. Reward embedded friends the old way. Fake lottery winnings. Distant relative leaves you a fortune. Amazing job offer. New identity. Loss of contact with friends and family. Bend lots of rule. Hard to hide trails. And creation of identities and facts is hard because of Google. But you can reward embedded friends in new ways. Hey, boss, I quit. I'm going to create a startup and find a venture capitalist and make huge amounts of money. Or just be given huge amounts of money and never actually make any money. Everything's above board. The paperwork is routine. There's even a standard tax form for this. Right? You mess around with a startup for a bunch of years. You get paid to surf the web and do whatever. And even if it doesn't work out, a failed startup looks good on your resume.
It's true.
Amazing fact, one of these startups actually succeeded. Obviously made up, but it's entirely possible that could happen.
Yeah.
Operation Overdrive. Influence business decision using NSA contracts or purchasing as leverage. Example, Skype. Skype was P2P encrypted video and voice. Didn't use standard protocols. Was out of the Federal Trade Commission jurisdiction because it was in Luxembourg. It's not open source, and we couldn't buy them off. So it was popular with independent actors like human rights activists, U.S. adverse political movements, terrorists, etc. So first partner was eBay, which was a friend of the NSA. So eBay buys Skype in 2005 for $4 billion. But the contract was bungled by the eBay lawyers. They only got access to the app. They didn't get the source code or control over the program. The NSA is unclear on why the lawyers were not briefed on what the point of the buying Skype was. So attempts to fulfill objectives failed. Cannot retry overdrive with eBay. So in 2009, eBay sells Skype back to the founders for $2.5 billion. And eBay's not a happy friend of the NSA anymore. So in 2011, Microsoft, a super friend of the NSA, buys Skype for $8.5 billion. Bullet point, ensure lawyers briefed on the point of buying Skype. Microsoft's centralized Skype architecture, and we now have full collection and no encryption.
Yay.
Expensive, but necessary.
Right, and you wonder, sometimes, you think Microsoft got, I mean, this is total speculation, but do you think it's possible Microsoft, do you think they were encouraged to centralize it by the NSA?
Who knows? There was talk about, they had to make it so that it could be wiretapped.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe. This all sounds totally feasible, right?
Yeah. And then there was Operation Queen, which was for free open source software and internet activities. They're often consensus-based. There's no particular person with special authority, and it's based on rough consensus and working code and a lot of internationalization. So, you can't target people only in the US and stuff like that. So in theory, this is all the Department of State's problem, but, they're not interested and they're not tech savvy. Mm-hmm. And diplomats have no traction with the Internet Engineering Task Force. So leveraging existing resources to embed a friend of the NSA in an open source project. Or just use free agents or get witless volunteers. And they psyops for nerds, take over technical discussions about self-signed certificates and just keep disrupting it so that nothing can happen by bringing up points and starting arguments and things like that. Right? Disrupt consensus building.
Yeah.
So now self-signed certificates and browsers offer privacy but no authentication. And no cost to either party, and are obvious for a no configuration default. However, with the NSA in there, secrecy without authentication is pointless. You could be talking to the NSA, so why would you want to use that? And it also gives a false sense of security. And so Firefox and Chrome and Safari don't implement self-signed certificates.
Right. They give you a big warning.
Yep. Also, no multi-home routing without using autonomous system numbers. So that locks users to their ISPs and makes collection much simpler. And no flow routing in IPv6, right? There was a proposed feature for IPv6 that would give the user more control about how their traffic was routed, but that was taken out of IPv6. Or, coming up with a lot of competing standards for encrypted email so that none of them will be adopted. Mm-hmm. Or, trying to block voice over IP until Skype made it so that they couldn't anymore. Or HTTP 2.0, a subject very close to PHK's heart, is making it mandatory that you have TLS, but also making man-in-the-middle proxies an official part of the protocol. Right? Like, when an office will be behind a proxy, but can intercept all the SSL traffic.
Right.
Kind of like something like RelaD that we've talked about. Mm-hmm. But by putting that in the specification, it means that the NSA might be able to run a man-in-the-middle without SSL detecting it now, because it's part of the protocol, and things like that. So methods are FUD, play the GPL versus BSD card, start bike set discussions, or soak up mental bandwidth with bogus crypto proposals.
Oh, dang it, that's us.
Yeah.
That is very true, that we get caught up in a lot of these arguments. Although I almost believe this is geek nature, to be honest. They're just in this theory, they'd be exploiting that, I suppose. Yes.
Or recent work was looking at changing from certificate authorities to DANE, which is this protocol where you would tie certificates with DNSSEC. Right? So the NSI realizes that PKI and certificate authorities are compromised by everyone, not only the NSA. Right? So we can't trust this because other people can compromise it too. So let's replace it with DANE. So now we just have to instead of having to worry about hundreds of root certificates or whatever, we can just take over the trust validation is done via UDP rather than TCP, so they can spoof it more easily. And it's all from a single DNSSEC root certificate, right? The root zone is signed with this DNS certificate, or DNSSEC. So if they compromise that one certificate, then they can own everything.
Mm-hmm.
And, with UDP, there's also packet race attacks and other stuff. And it goes on and on. There's even more stuff in here. But it's great.
Yeah. Kind of a little sobering.
He loves to make fun of the Debian one.
They are good. That's what I was thinking about, the consensus where you screw up the conversation. That was crossing my mind.
The one was a sysadmin that works for a nonprofit. He says, I'm a sysadmin for this nonprofit organization. They say, as long as Outlook works, they don't care. I'm doing squat. It's all humming. In reality, the organization is a front for the NSA, where they're getting personnel with credibility and non-shop IT support. All you have to do is give the guy a chair, a desk, and an Ethernet and a cover story.
Yeah, I think he even plays the Snowden angle. He says Snowden has no orchestra documents because they're all buried in boring departments like purchasing, facility management, and personnel. Yeah,
it's like, this is why these fake operations he made up weren't discovered by Snowden. But he talks about is like, don't do the obvious thing, like if you add an obvious vulnerability to an open source project, it'll be found and the cover of the person who added it will be blown.
Yeah.
Instead, make mistakes, either yourself or accept a patch from some random third party where there's a mistake.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Do general code obfuscation or misleading docs where it's documented like it's supposed to work, but it's actually not the way it works, or forwards or backwards. Or use deceptive defaults.
Right. Default is king.
And it doesn't have to be the core source code. For example, FreeBSD has 20,000 ports, right, that are not part of the FreeBSD project itself. Well, it's easy to get stuff in there, right?
Right, because you can have one person who's responsible for that port, and you just have to compromise that person.
Port maintainers often work alone. Most ports have local FreeBSD patches. Nobody reviews these for security unless it gets like a setuid bit or something like that.
Yeah.
Or yes, here's one. Poster boy, Debian random. This code makes Valgrind complain. Doesn't seem to do anything. Comment it out. And then now there's only 64,000 different SSL keys or random states in the thing. And that lasted for 2 years.
2 years, yeah. And it could be still deployed. Could be.
Or the crown jewel is OpenSSL. It's the go-to library for almost everything crypto. The API is a nightmare. The documentation is deficient and misleading. And the defaults are deceptive. And that's why in the future version of OpenSSH, it won't depend on OpenSSL anymore.
Good. It's a little, I mean, you just don't know anymore. We just have to live in this constant state of unknown.
Mm-hmm.
Good write-up, though. And the full presentation is linked in the roundup. If it's the last link in the roundup if you guys want to check it out.
Yep.
Yeah. Wow. Well,
I didn't mean to stick on that for quite that long.
It was really interesting.
So much good stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And it really makes you think. It really does make you think. Our NSA Operation Orchestra. And he challenged you to prove him wrong. He's not saying it's right. He's just saying you can't prove it's not right.
Just saying that any of those things could be happening.
Yeah.
And hopefully the NSA doesn't pick up that and use it as a manual.
Oh, I think they probably already know. I think some of this is probably.
I don't know. The venture capital idea is pretty clever.
Yeah, very clever. I think that was one of my favorite.
And also
things.
Just killing startups by using patent trolling.
Yep. Just exploiting the patent system.
And so the little startup, maybe it could have got somewhere by itself, but instead come out and offered like huge piles of money and then make it all go away when the patent, so that
what struggling startup wouldn't take that? If a sweetheart deal like that, of course.
Yeah, and then they back it out and say, sorry, with this patent in the way, we just can't do it.
I also think this getting injected in open source communities and the technical discussions is something that pre-Snowden leaks, we didn't think maybe the government was sophisticated enough to do, but now post-Snowden leaks, we know they're very sophisticated, and there's geeks that work there, just like the rest of us who are already in these communities.
We see these things happening with like IPsec and SSL all the time, and we assume it's just the general argumentative nature of geeky people. Right?
Yeah. The good stuff. All right, Alan, is there anything else we want to cover in this episode?
No, that's about it.
All right, well, we'd love to have you join us live over at jblive.tv. Now, we won't be live next week, but we will be live the week following that. So show up at 1 p.m. Pacific, right? Which is...
it's 4 p.m. Eastern, 2100 UTC.
Boom, over at jblive.tv for the video or jblive.info for for the audio stream. And don't forget, TechSNAP comes out basically every Friday morning, and you can get an HD or regular resolutions or WebMs or audio only. And we have RSS feeds for all of that. And there's also torrents there with torrent feeds you can subscribe to and help us defer those bandwidth costs. All right, everyone. Well, thank you so much for tuning this week's episode of TechSNAP. We'll see you right back here next week.